For many years, I have been fascinated by Chinese history, particularly the history of pre-modern imperial China. This is an interest that I have pursued intermittently since about 2001, but that I have never engaged with in any systematic way until the present. Since I desire to more fully acquaint myself with the course and nature of Chinese history, I have decided to initiate a new video series detailing the history of China. This is something that I have wanted to do for a long time, but up until this juncture I have felt rather unqualified for the task. However, there is no time like the present, and I have discovered that one of the best ways to learn history is to force yourself to explain it in a coherent fashion to others. Before we go any further, let me detail the evolution of my interest in Chinese history. When I was in my early teens, I developed an interest in Chinese history that I have held ever since. At that time, during the early 2000s, Koei's Dynasty Warriors games on PlayStation 2 were among my favorites, and I was fascinated by the fact that the characters and events from the game were based on real history. I eagerly played through the Koei games from that era and read all of the historical information that each game contained. Of course, this failed to fully sate my hunger for historical information. Kessen, Dynasty Tactics, and other games got me interested in the history of the Three Kingdoms period, so I began to look for books on the subject. My budding interest in Chinese history coincided with my ever increasing fascination with all things historical at that juncture in my life. Ultimately, ancient Greek history proved to be my truest love, and Rome won the second prize, but I still had an interest in ancient China. While I was still in high school, I found Charles O. Hucker's China's Imperial Past, a dated but informative and engaging overview of China from the Shang to the Qing. Once I got to college, the vast majority of my academic study revolved around ancient history and learning the Greek and Latin languages. The only class that I got to take on East Asian history ended up being about modern China rather than pre-modern China, as I had hoped. Scheduling conflicts can, as all college students know, prevent you from getting around to every subject that you want to investigate. In the summer between undergraduate and grad school, I finally had the time to read the novel The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and I was mesmerized. I am not someone who is easily impressed, and I tend to favor history over epic and myth, but there was something about the Three Kingdoms period that has always fascinated me to no end. As someone who has been to grad school knows, specializing in any field means that you're left with limited free time and few opportunities to focus on the breadth of your knowledge rather than the depth, which is ultimately what gets you a master's or a doctorate and earns you a paycheck. That being said, I found a few books over the next several years comparing Han China with Greece and Rome, and I was fascinated by the parallels and divergences. At some point that I don't recall, I had the realization that one of the best ways to increase my knowledge of my chosen field was to revisit my old interest in pre-modern China. A few years ago, I finally reached the dissertation writing phase of my graduate school career, and I finally got the opportunity to teach my own courses. The first course that I signed up to teach was World Civilization 1, something that I had never served as a grader or TA for, and also something that I had never taken any kind of graduate courses for. For that course, I had to rely heavily on my sporadic leisure readings over the years about the Middle East, Russia, India, and China in order to cobble together presentations covering the entire breadth of world history up to the year 1500. Needless to say, World Civilization 1 does not lend itself to depth, and however unsatisfying it was for me, my only real job as an instructor in that course was to introduce my students to the bare-bone facts about all of the various civilizations that I could cover, but without going into any meaningful depth. So that's where this channel and this series come in. With any luck, this series will enable me to expand my knowledge of the history of China and feel like I'm making up for what I feel were inadequate intro lectures in World Civilization 1 to boot. This series will take quite a long time to complete since I am still writing my dissertation, make videos on a bevy of other topics, and have a life that extends beyond the realm of history. In addition, I have not yet determined a chronological end date for this series. As such, I can give no accurate predictions about what you might expect and when you might expect it in regards to entries in this series. What I can tell you is that things are coming and that we're going to start in the prehistorical era. I hope that you will be so kind as to come along for the ride.